you need to observe the winter very carefully, and that's the time when you grow. Okay, that's the time when you start preparing, and you start building the character that you need. You start building the knowledge that you need, perhaps the connections or the skills that you will need, because when that wave comes, when the summer comes, you're going to need those. So, talking about this whole egoic mind topic, one of the big themes that you hear is this whole theme of resistance. Now, we were discussing how there's all these ups and downs and cycles to life and to reality, external form reality, and how this is a natural part of reality, right? So, nature works in cycles, there's ups and downs among all the levels of life. And I think that maybe in a separate episode, we're going to be discussing what this means on a more deep level. So we're probably going to be talking about yin and yang and this whole positive negative concept. But going back to resistance, so this whole notion that when you're on a high, either socially, economically, physically, you feel good, and you want to keep things there. And when you're on a low, you're feeling, you know, ill at ease with yourself, like something has been taken from you, something fundamental. You feel not complete, and you're longing for the good old days or hoping that the future gets better. Um, I was thinking about an analogy the other day, which probably illustrates how to navigate life in a more constructive and generally healthy way. And I was thinking about surfers actually. So, if you ever look at surfers, they're out there enjoying the waves, they're out there having fun, and there's a couple of things that they're doing which resembles the way that the wise and healthy life is lived. One of them is they're not resisting the ocean. Okay, so the waves are not being battled. They're not fighting against the waves. They are not trying to resist the massive movement of the ocean, and they're also not trying to. They're not hoping for the ocean to stand still and just be perfect, right? They go out there and they work with whatever they got, right? And sometimes the waves will be big and sometimes they'll be small, and they're under no illusion that the ocean is out there to give them the best surfing experience, right? That would be insane, right? So, but they're also not fighting it, right? So they're not resisting the movement of the ocean. They've rather learned to enjoy it, and that's a really interesting analogy. And there's another analogy which I think really applies to life, and that is that a surfer, even though a surfer enjoys the waves, they also just enjoy the ocean, right? I mean, it's not as if you see a surfer becoming depressed between waves, right? In fact, a lot of what a surfer does is sit and wait, right? They are sitting out there behind the waves, just chatting. They are paddling around a little bit. They're enjoying the water. They're enjoying the sun. They enjoy the motion that the ocean produces around them. They're spending time around friends, just relaxing. And when a good wave comes along, then they get ready for action, and they do what is necessary, and they take the wave. But they are not they're not depressed, and they don't consider the time between waves to be wasted time, or to be useless, or to be somehow less good than the time when they're on top of a wave, right? So, in fact, their ability to enjoy a wave is predicated on their ability to properly wait for it and know when and how to take action when that wave comes along. Okay, so I thought that the surfer analogy was really interesting because, compared to the way most of us live life, which is to say, I'm enjoying the wave, but when the quiet or the down period comes, I then become depressed because I've lost something. The surfer, they just sit and wait. They keep a relaxed, positive attitude, and when the next wave comes along, then they take action and they enjoy it. And so I thought that was an interesting way to compare how not to resist the ups and downs of life, because that resistance, funny enough, keeps us stuck in a low even when a high moment comes, right? So that's the other big irony of it is that if you've become a person who is identified with the next big thing, what tends to happen is even when you get the next big thing, you can't enjoy it because you've essentially trained your mind to be waiting for the next big thing to make you happy. So that's one of the biggest ironies that I've felt in my own life, and that some of people like Eckart Tolle talk about, is you essentially become what you train to become, and if you're constantly conditioning your mind to happiness in the future, well, that future never really arrives. We're going to talk about time later on. I mean, the power of now. There's a big thing to be said about time. But your ability to enjoy the future and to make that future realize lies in how you are behaving in this very moment. And so that's one of the other things is, listen, if you're having a kind of a downturn in your life, maintaining a positive, constructive attitude is much more effective at getting you to a higher point in life. Now, I had worked out a couple of additional, I would say, metaphors, or I don't know how you want to call them, examples of, just to illustrate this point. One of them was tulips. Living in Holland, you see tulips, the flower in the spring. But imagine what a tulip seed would think once the summer. They're bulbs, by the way. They're not seeds. But once the summer is over and things start to get chillier, if a tulip seed had a bulb, had a consciousness, it would probably, if it had human consciousness, it would probably start complaining, right? It's like, oh, what is all this wind and all this cold about, and it's rainy and miserable out here, and I don't really like it anymore, and I miss the summer when things were good, and blah blah blah, and on and on. However, if you know anything about flowers, then you would know that a tulip cannot flower unless the bulb has been exposed to very cold temperatures for quite some time during the winter while it's underground. And in fact, it's that temperature that makes it ready to bloom when the spring comes. Okay, so tulips are a great example of, look, just because it's winter, it doesn't mean that you need to have a negative time in your life and that you need to resist that and have a negative attitude towards it. You need to observe the winter very carefully, and that's the time when you grow. Okay, that's the time when you start preparing and you start building the character that you need. You start building the knowledge that you need, perhaps the connections or the skills that you will need, because when that wave comes, when the summer comes, you're going to need those. Okay, and if you spend your whole winter just complaining and being negative about stuff, when the summer comes, well, what are you going to have? You're not going to be able to bloom. You're not going to be able to take that wave, because you're so soaked in negativity, you might not even notice that the wave is there. Okay, so that's another analogy. And so all these analogies are meant to illustrate that it's not just that you need to learn how to enjoy and grow during the winters in your life, so to speak, but that you should not resist the movement from summer into winter, because you need to make space for that change, and that change and that space that you're making is going to create something new. And so another example of that is, imagine when you're a kid, right? Now, if you're a kid and suppose that our lifetime was not as long as it normally is, and that you would go from childhood to adulthood or to old age within a matter of a week, for example. Now, somewhere around Wednesday, you would really start moaning and going like, yeah, man, I don't really feel like growing up. I don't want all these responsibilities. I don't want to have all this weight on my shoulders about having to make a living and whatever. But what would happen is, so you're resisting it. It's happening anyway, and you're not making space for the things that come with that period of your life. So the first thing that comes to my mind is sex, right? I mean, a kid doesn't even have a clue. They've never enjoyed sex with a person that they like, and so if you resist that next step, or that flow and that movement towards whatever's coming next, you're not making space for some things that you don't even imagine are there, and which are going to make your life completely interesting and different and cool in ways that you can't possibly predict. So our nature is to hold on to things, right? So we want to keep reality stable, and we want to stay stuck in the good stuff, and we don't want it to disappear. But what we cannot possibly predict is how a good thing can bring within it a bad thing, and how a bad thing can bring opportunity in a good thing. So when you start to acquire this philosophy, events in your life start losing so much meaning. You take them for whatever they are, and you don't judge them as good or bad, because you can't possibly have the whole picture. So you allow them to happen. One example that I have in my own life is, I lost my job somewhere back in 2011, somewhere in the crisis, and I decided to take some time off and do a bit of a sabbatical, which ended up lasting a couple of years. And during that sabbatical, I picked up art. I started to paint, and I kind of taught myself how to paint, and it turned out that I kind of had a knack for it. So within a matter of about a year, I was already teaching art. I was making paintings that most people would consider fairly good in terms of realistic painting. I don't think I'm particularly talented. I wouldn't consider myself talented. I was really interested in it, and so now art is a major part of my life. It's something that I have at times devoted quite a bit of time to. And people who see my paintings, they will say like, "Oh wow, you found your calling or something, and you have talent." But the way I see it, I don't have talent. I was just interested in it. But also the fact that I had lost my job and that I had all this time on my hands allowed something new to come into my life, right? Without that space, nothing new can come in. So you have to make space. You have to allow those seasons where things are, quote unquote, not going the way you would like. And if you detect the opportunity within those, there's growth, amazing growth that can happen in your life from that, because you allow the space to come in, and from space, new things can grow. Now, whenever we start talking about this topic of allowing, I think that there's a confusion that very often comes up, and it used to bother me as well, and I still need to remind myself of this whenever I start thinking this way, and that is, so people go, well, so what does that mean? Does that mean that I don't need to bother with taking care of my kids or working anymore and stuff? Like nothing matters, and if the children are dying of hunger in Africa, well, then we don't need to do anything, because we're just allowing stuff to be the way it is. Now, look, that is kind of a confusion in terms. So the allowing that we're talking about here is, we're talking about your internal ecosystem, okay? Your internal emotions and thoughts. And we're talking about the way you process external circumstances. And this is a very important distinction, because otherwise you could go away thinking that I'm preaching some kind of, just go be a hippie, right? Don't bother, working, don't bother building anything useful, because, hey, you're just allowing stuff to be, and, whatever comes. And so I think that what you need to understand is that the world of form, the world in which you live, matters, right? You need to honor that world. You need to, you just gotta get your act together, right? I mean, what's all this self-help stuff about if you're not acting with dignity and integrity, and keeping your act clean? You make your bed in the morning. You keep yourself healthy. You eat good food. You treat others well. And the only distinction is that when you are allowing, what you're essentially doing is you are accepting the moment as it is. You are accepting reality as it is. You're not resisting it, okay? Part of this is understanding that the only thing you control, and mind you, this is a control that you have to earn through a lot of meditation and hard work on yourself. But the only thing that you control is your mindset and your emotions. And even that there, the degree of control that you have is, just enough to steer the ship left and right a little bit. You don't have a huge degree of control, but you do have some. Whereas everything else around you, do not truly control. So what you're trying to get to is a place where you can work hard, you can be engaged, you can go out there, try to make a difference, try to improve your life, improve other people's lives. But ultimately, once your work is done, you step back and you allow nature to do its work. You allow reality to essentially go in whichever direction it's going to go. And you don't resent it for it. Okay? So if things pan out the way you wanted, well, you can feel happy about it, and that's good. You try not to identify with that, because identification is the problem again. And if things don't go the way you want, well, you count your losses and you take the learnings from it, and you maintain an inner field or an inner attitude of non-resistance. You are not resisting the way things turned out. You let it go. Okay, so that's what we're talking about here. And so we were talking, of course, about the egoic mind, and the way Eckhart Tolle in The Power of Now describes the egoic mind is a mind that resists reality, right? You are in constant resistance to what is, okay? You're not satisfied with it. You wish that the now, the reality in which you inhabit right now, was different than it is. And that creates this tension inside of you. And like I said a little bit earlier in this clip, what you start to do is then you start to try and negotiate and manipulate. And the first thing that you do is you'll throw an emotional tantrum. And you're throwing that tantrum because internally you seem to believe that by being upset or mad at reality, and mad or sad at the way things turn out to be, that you can somehow change them. Okay, so you're gonna throw a tantrum at the big guy up there in the sky, and go like, well, this theme park called reality didn't pan out to my expectations, so I'm gonna be mad at you, right? And you're like, well, sure, well, you can throw all the tantrums you want, but reality is as it is, so you might as well enjoy it, and you might as well surf the wave. Remember, and so you essentially throw this emotional tantrum, and what you're essentially doing is, see, reality could turn out to be painful, right? I mean, you could lose a child, for example. So that's injury. The moment you resist that loss, now you're adding insult to it. Okay, now you are punishing yourself over and over again for an event that could be emotionally painful, but now you're creating psychological pain for yourself, and it's not going to change things. Okay, so there's a couple of reasons why we do this. The first one I mentioned is this belief that by throwing an emotional tantrum and just keep, let's say, hurting yourself through upset and anger, that things are going to be different, which they're not. But the other one is the ego needs to survive somehow. And I think that by throwing that tantrum and by going, well, I don't accept this because, you are somehow trying to preserve your self-image and your self-image. Say that your child died. Hopefully none of you have experienced that, but say that your child dies. And so you will, before your child died, your self-image was that of a parent, okay? But now you've lost that. So what are you left with then? Well, you can't just go like, oh, well, now I guess I'm not a parent anymore, because parenthood was part of what you consider your sense of self. So now, instead of being a parent, what you become, or what the ego needs you to become, is a parent in grief, right? Like the parent who lost the child. And that way you maintain your integrity and your sense of self, because, well, who would you be without that parenthood image, right? You don't know. There's a void there. and you need to fill it somehow. And since you don't have the tools and the knowledge and all the stuff that we're sharing, the kind of content that we're sharing here on how to deal with it and revert back to, well, that was a part of my life situation, but it doesn't determine who I am. Since you don't have that that way to fill the void from within, then you're looking at reasons outside of you to do that. And so you're going to grieve the child forever, and you're going to you won't be able to let it go because it defines you. Okay, so you can't let it go. You would rather have the identity of a victim rather than just let go of it and let it be whatever it is. So at the end of the day, what it comes down to with this topic is you have the topic of the ups and downs that life naturally brings as you progress through life, and then you have either the resisting or the allowing of those ups and downs. Okay, allowing those ups and downs makes you happy. It makes you have a very lovely, rewarding life. Resisting it, that resistance is called the egoic mind. You are trying to find yourself, you are trying to find safety and stability in a world that cannot possibly provide it because it's always changing. And so I hope you enjoyed that video. I think that, having covered the identification with mind as one of the first topics, and having covered the egoic mind, which is the let's say the product of that identification, probably my next video is going to go into what the whole topic of time is, which is a major topic in this book. As you will see, and I might as well give you a bit of a cliffhanger here, the egoic mind lives in time. It lives either in the past or the future. It doesn't live in the now, which is what the book is advocating that you should do. Okay, so there you have it. I'm signing off on this one. I hope you enjoyed the video about the egoic mind, and hope to bring you some good content pretty soon. Cheers.